Tonight we have Mr. Fight. Oh, I get I and a okay. And Mr. Bouvier to talk about, give us a little presentation of Axia, potentially for wiring the town.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'll speak so that you can get it on recording. So my name is Frederick Fight. I work for Axia Networks, and Axia is currently the operator of the middle mile network, so the fiber optic network that's currently in town that was installed over the past 3 or 4 years. Axia was hired by the network owner, which is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Broadband Institute, as the long-term wholesale-only network operator. So we currently have the role of wholesale-only network operator for the middle mile network, and we are working with towns, trying to work with towns to try to develop fiber to the home solutions that are basically tied into and built off of the middle mile network. And this is something that we do where we're based out of. Axia, the company that operates the Massachusetts MB123, is a Massachusetts company, a subsidiary of our primary company, our home company basically, which is based in Calgary in Alberta, and we operate a similar network which is called the Alberta SuperNet. It's similar to the MB123, and it's a public-private partnership between the province of Alberta. In the similarity in Massachusetts, it's the public entities, or the Mass Broadband Institute, and then the NTIA, the middle mile network, was built as a result of the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, the broadband stimulus funds. So in Alberta, the Alberta SuperNet is a little bit more mature. It's been in operation for about 9 years now, and it's similar in that it's a middle mile network connecting primarily government institutions, provincial government institutions and schools and such. And now in Alberta, we're starting to build fiber to the home, or last mile networks that are connected to the Alberta SuperNet. And we're trying to do the same thing down here in Massachusetts. We are currently working with the South Hadley Electric Light Department, so in that case it's the Electric Light Department and not the municipality directly. But we are starting to build fiber to the premise in the town of South Hadley under a model that we are currently presenting to the other towns within the footprint of the network, primarily the so-called unserved towns, the 44, 45 towns that are eligible for the MBI grant funds. But also to some partially served towns, some cable towns that have portions of the town that are not served by the cable plant. So the model that we are working with in South Hadley is it's exactly the same that we're presenting to the other towns. It's replicable, and it would allow us to enter the market in the same exact fashion with each town, and therefore allow us to present the same exact pricing and services to each town. So the model basically is that we propose building a fiber to the curb system. So that's the fiber distribution network, which includes everything except the final drops to the homes. And Axia would take on the capital cost of building the final drops to the homes as people take service over time. And also Axia would take on the capital cost of installing all the electronics, everything necessary at the beginning to start operations, but also, once again, as people take service over time, install the electronics as necessary. So we propose building a fiber to the curb system, and therefore the town would have to come up with the money to build only a fiber to the curb system. And we separate out the cost of the drops to the homes and the cost of all the electronics to make the project much more palatable at the beginning, lower the cost at the beginning. And Axia takes on the capital costs of building the drops over the years as people take service, and installing the necessary electronics over the years as people take service, so we can spread those costs out over time. And towards the cost of that fiber to the curb system, Axia will contribute $600 per premise. And of course, in addition to the $600 per premise, we pay for all of the drops, the fiber drops as people take service, and all of the electronics as people take service. So that's the replicable offer that we're offering each town. So each town's obligation is unique because each town's ultimate cost of the system is going to be a little bit different. these types of systems primarily are kind of a mileage based. It basically depends on how many road miles need to get built in town, how many homes per mile, and therefore how many thousands of dollars, if you will, per home. So it depends on those metrics, ultimately how much it costs per home. But from Axia's perspective, we're investing in, we're willing to enter the market at the $600 per home for the fiber to the curb system, plus again the cost of the drops and the electronics over time as people take service.
In addition to that, Axia will manage the connection to our gateways in Boston and Cambridge. That will be all absorbed by us as well.
And we take full operation and maintenance O&M responsibility on the network, so we do break fix. We're responsible for operations and maintenance repairs on the fiber. And our philosophy as a service provider, so we would then be the internet service provider, but our philosophy in that regard is we provide internet access only, so we don't provide telephone service, we don't provide television programming. We believe that very, very soon, if not already, everything is streaming, everything is web-based, including TV programming. It's not there yet, but certainly the past few weeks, the past few months, there's been a lot of movement in that direction where content and content aggregators, content distributors are starting to actually send reasonable programming and packages over the internet. But so we do internet only. We treat internet access as a utility, not an amenity. We have 2 residential services. We have a few business services, but I don't think we have to even discuss those. But we have 2 residential services. It's like connecting to the electrical grid. You can do it either 100 amps or 200 amps. We could sell a 100 meg service or a gig service. And entering the market as we do at the $600 per home, and knowing all of our fixed costs on the wholesale part of it, which is the MB123, which we ride back to Boston on a northern route and a southern route to Cambridge or to Boston. There we get internet transit from 2 separate providers, so they have separate networks. We offer those 2 services based on a 2-year commitment for $49 for the 100 meg service and $69 for the gig service. That's based on a 2-year contract. The prices are $10 per month higher per service based on a 1-year contract. And the installation fee for the gig service is nothing. The installation fee for the 100 meg service is $99. So once again, we make a long-term commitment. The pricing is pretty reasonable, and we make a long-term commitment. We do ask for a 20-year IRU with a 20-year renewable option, but that reflects the commitment to the capital investment that we're going to make and our relatively low margins and our willingness to make back our investment and our profit over time.
So the town would maintain ownership of that fiber asset?
Yeah, the IRU is indefeasible right of use, which is basically a lease, long-term lease. So we provide internet access. We basically would want an exclusivity, if you will, on the internet access. But the network remains open for any other kind of service, and we don't charge service providers access to the network for telephone service, so you can certainly use Vonage or something, but some of the retail service providers that already provide service on the middle mile network, to your schools, for example, they have their own telephone services. They have their own voice switches, which are located mostly in Springfield or Boston, and they're already directly tied into our network. So they can sell phone service to residents of Vermont directly, and Axia would facilitate them being able to sell telephone service over the fiber network, and we wouldn't charge them for it. And the same holds true for a television service, like an IPTV service. The caveat is the telephone service requires very, very little bandwidth. It doesn't matter if you have a 100 meg service and the telephone service takes just a little bit out of it. An IPTV service requires more bandwidth. Basically, that provider would have to get their IPTV service to the front door of the fiber to the home network, basically. But the network remains open to additional services if your residents want to get voice service from a local provider, for example, instead of a Vonage. I think those are the key points.
Yeah. So in summary, because it's a lot of stuff. So we'll design the network. We'll contract out for the folks who will actually build the distribution fiber. We have several providers that we work with, several construction companies that do the work that we'll probably run through an RFP process. we'll complete that fiber to the curb build. And as Fred pointed out, we'll also complete the connection to the homes that subscribe, which again, instead of buying all that material, all the inventory up front for everybody, if not everybody takes the service, we'll do it as they come on board, and it does reduce that upfront cost to an extent, but it includes the electronics, the final connection from the curb to the home up to 300 feet. Beyond 300 feet, typically, we'll work on a case-by-case basis for additional costs.
Fiber to the curb system is usually intentionally designed and pushed to be within 300 feet. Like most homes, some homes obviously have a sit back from the road much farther than others, and have something of a case-by-case basis to take up the extra installation.
Right. So all the electronics, and then managing the network from a break-fix perspective, 24/7, 365 customer service, network operations center, managing all the connections and monitoring them as well. And then again, the connection through the middle mile network to our gateways in Boston, and we're also contributing a $600 to that build of the distribution grid to the curb per premise, whether they take the service or not.
I'll also point out, so we are working with a few towns who happen to be non-WiredWest members, by the way, currently, who have chosen to try to. We haven't had no official paperwork between Axia and those towns yet, but they'd like to just move forward a little bit more quickly than not. So they want to engage with Axia to do the design of the network, and that's another thing we do without charge. So that's a value add, so to speak. And then proceed with Axia as the basically general contractor or construction manager of the project. Now that's also something that the MBI is working to do. So apropos of applying to the MBI for your grant funds, and this application, I don't believe that's available yet, not yet, from the MBI, there are going to be two ways to apply. Two or more ways to apply. You could, I think, check a box that's going to say something like working with a private enterprise partner, which would be basically what we just described, and the way the few towns that want to kind of try to move forward a little bit more quickly are planning on going forward. The way the MBI has things designed so far, they basically have the grant funds to the towns divided up into two buckets, and it seems as if towns work with us in that fashion, they're going to be eligible for funds from only one of those two buckets. It also seems as if Axia's contributions will more than make up for that. Don't have the actual side-by-side number comparisons on it. As an option to that, you could apply to the MBI to participate instead of checking the box that I mentioned, private enterprise partnership solution. You could check the box that says the MBI regional last mile solution. So in that case, the MBI will go ahead and do the design of the network. We try to have as much conversations with them as possible. Our designs sync up. It's kind of simple. Active Ethernet, we're moving active. They do talk about a PON network, but still they're going to wire it as an active Ethernet network and put all the PON gear inside. I won't burden you with that. And apply for the funds in that fashion. They would design it. They would be the construction manager while it's being built, and then Axia could enter the picture as the network operator and service provider later. That's still a bit of a moving target with the MBI and how they're dispersing funds and what they will allow and not allow. So it depends how you're comfortable with your relationship with the MBI and applying for those funds. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So let's assume in the next 2 months, we brought it before the town approved it, and we worked with you folks. When would we see build-out start, and when could we anticipate as a end date for the build-out?
There's a long lead time item right off the bat, which is the make-ready process. Yeah. So after the funding is approved, and the MBI wants to see, well, your funding is approved, basically, as far as I understand.
We already have funding approved.
Yes. Congratulations. So then the MBI will then discuss with you after the grant application if that's relevant, if waiting for the grant process to be executed is relevant to your timeline. If not, we would do a formal design, put it out to at least 3 trusted OSP construction companies that we work with regularly for quotes, do the procurement as we need to with the town, and then we would perhaps working with the MBI, because they have a lot of valuable relationships with Verizon having to do with make-ready applications, which might speed the process. But once the make-ready applications are submitted for the few hundred utility poles in town, that process can take about a year for it to be complete. It's possible during that year enough of a section of town will be complete that we can start installing, but maybe not. We need a lot of contiguous ground before we really would mobilize. Once the make-ready is complete and we can install on the utility poles with have unfettered access to that, the installation in the town. What's the number of premises?
The what?
The number of premises?
About 897, I think.
897? And about how many road miles?
42.
40 something.
Oh, yeah, nice. So it's really dense then.
Yeah, and most of, we've got 71, 23, and 41
Right.
in Washington Road, and the rest of us got almost a square around the hills. So
It's relatively similar, well, lower road miles, but similar number of premises to the town of Leverett, and their fiber to the home network is under construction, and I believe has been for approximately 1 year. They're nearly complete. I think they have about 50% of the drops to the homes remaining. They're building it in a different style. They actually paid for up front all of the drops and all of the electronics. And their price tag was pretty high accordingly. So I would think construction time also would be approximately 1 year for completion. We're being a little conservative, because I'd rather not, 2 years from now you come back to me and say, why is it taking so long? But we should have, and also in Leverett, they're partially done with the drops, but they also have 250 customers online, so they have been able to, segment it out.
There's been a lot of discussion over the last 2 years about return on investment for the towns. The towns have voted to borrow up to X number of dollars. And there's been quite a bit of discussion about ultimately a business model where some of that money would be recouped by the towns. If we go with Axia, would any of that money be recouped, or is that because you're an independent company, private company? I know your model's going to be different. So that's one thing the townspeople are going to want to know about. Is, are we going to see any kind of return on our investment?
Our model doesn't do any co-billing to the customer for a portion of the money we receive on the monthly bill from the end user, the subscriber, to then be portioned off and shared with the MLP, for example. It just doesn't. The theory behind it is we don't want to add any burdens to adoption. We don't want there to be a large sign-up fee, for example. We're gonna, we'll take the cost of that and spread it over time. And we prefer there not be another line item on the monthly bill that's earmarked for a revenue share or a revenue payment for the bond debt. We feel that there's a lot of intrinsic value once the network gets built. The property value increase, I think, would be well beyond the approximately $3,000 per home for a fiber to the home system. Personally, I think the home values go up significantly more than that with this kind of amenity, this kind of utility. So there's that kind of equity, but our model doesn't really include for a revenue share or revenue bond payment type of approach.
Frederick, You just mentioned property values. Is there any data, you know, I've heard that a lot, and I've actually witnessed some events that would indicate that would be the case. But is there any data right now that actually shows that property values do increase within a particular area? I know it's always said and it's always argued, and it looks like it could be true, but is there data to support it?
I bet there's a ton of data, and I bet Monica knows a lot more about that than I do. I know I was driving through the town of Leverett the other day on the way to a meeting in Wendell and saw a few for sale signs and jotted down the phone numbers of the realtors because I'm really curious about that particular instance there. I haven't checked with them yet, though.
Yeah.
And my opinion is just that. It's more opinion. I've been working in this field for quite a while, though, so. And it has to do with a lot of factors, right? I mean, just the inherent, desirability and beauty and location of a town. It's almost equidistant proximity between Boston and New York City. So there are a lot of factors, I think, which would contribute to the equity, the property value increase being kind of on the higher side than normal.
Yes, Ken.
My question would be, what happens to WiredWest if you do all of the install and?
Well, I think the truth is we are offering, an option or an alternative to WiredWest in the functionality of network operator and service provider. Ultimately, the real key mechanism for this relationship is the agreement I referred to, the IRU agreement. That's where all of the key commercial terms reside. And that is executed between Axia and the network owner, and whether the network owner is an individual town or a cooperative of towns, doesn't matter.
So basically, if we take Axia, then we're eliminating WiredWest from the town.
From the
and all the benefits of WiredWest.
I think that's fair.
Okay.
I think that's a fair statement. It's worth noting this is Axia's specialty. We sort of focus on the strange little niche of forming public-private partnerships to construct and operate fiber-to-the-home networks, fiber networks. Historically, middle-mile fiber networks, and now last-mile fiber networks.
Well, like my understanding of WiredWest is that if we're with WiredWest, then basically part of the monies go to operate and the others pay back the bond. After the bond is paid off, whatever's not operating goes back to the towns as revenue. So basically, Axia is taking the revenue.
We are also operating the network, and
as is WiredWest.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You're not in a debate here. You're asking a question. That's it. You want to debate, you can debate with us.
Okay.
But
Or
just
you
ask
can
your
go after,
question.
you can go talk to these guys all you want. So,
Okay.
happy to.
please. Okay. I think we need to chew on this for a little while.
Yeah, I think we do. Absolutely.
I have another question back here.
Sorry, just one point of clarity. You said that you would require a 20-year renewable contract. So after 20 years, at your discretion, the contract would be renewed?
There would be there'd be some commercial terms that we would agree on. There'd be some performance metrics and such that we would have to meet.
Mm-hmm.
And if such were met, we would have a renewable.
Okay. And the other question is your user fees, which you have a 2-year lock-in for. Is there any guarantee that those user fees would remain at the level that you proposed them, or is that something that would be open for change after the 2-year period?
Also to be spelled out in the IRU, essentially the IRU creates a regulated monopoly. So the pricing and costing and service and pricing over time would be spelled out in the IRU. The cost of bandwidth decreases over time. Typically, retailers don't want their end users' bills to go down over time. So historically, in this industry, customers' bills remain approximately the same, and then their bandwidth increases. That's typically how retailers try to maintain the relationship with the customer, and that's basically what we would do.
I'm confused by that, I'm sorry. When you say, so the bill would go up and the bandwidth would go up as well?
The bill would stay the same, and the bandwidth would go up.
I see, okay. So you would be theoretically for the same price offering more service?
Lower cost per megabit.
Okay, got it.
Over time.
So the megabit would go up and the bill would go up, but not as necessarily the same amount.
Well, correct. Or the bill would stay the same at a higher bandwidth.
Okay, all right.
Further questions? So, like I said, Fred, we need to think on this for a little while. Intriguing ideas, concepts.
Thank you so much for having us over.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming, thanks for the presentation.
My pleasure.
Time.
Thank you very much.